fast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-wide facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast, where we cut through dairy industry noise to get you the insights that actually matter for your operation.
And today we're tackling a deeply uncomfortable truth. It's the conversation that nobody wants to have at the coffee shop, but it's absolutely essential.
It really is. We're talking about the runway for the mid-sized dairy farm. It's far shorter than most producers realize.
Yeah, that 300 to 700 cow operation, that whole segment of the industry is facing this structural headwind that is almost impossible to overcome on its own.
And here's the most difficult part of all of this. The people who finance your operation, the people who process your milk, talking about the co-op boards, the bankers, they know your timeline before you do.
That gap, that information asymmetry, that delay in recognition is costing farmers millions in lost equity all across the country.
So today we're diving deep into an internal feature piece we published on this structural change. We're going to talk about why there's a critical 12 to 18-month decision window facing producers right now.
The big question isn't if consolidation is happening. I mean, come on, we've accepted that reality for decades, right?
Right. The real question is, when the clock runs out on sustainable, profitable commodity production for that mid-size segment.
If you are running 300 to 700 cows, you absolutely need to hear this. Because the core math we're seeing, and this is pulled directly from USDA data, it says that waiting for higher prices to magically fix a structural cost problem, well, it's just not a sustainable strategy anymore.
No. The margin compression we're talking about today, it's really about survival. It's not just about optimizing profits for the next quarter.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little. Why does this matter right now? We've always had low cycles. We've always had farms selling out. What makes this moment different? Why is it structural, not just, another deep cyclical downswing?
It's the convergence of capital and regulation. That's the key.
Exactly. You have these massive, irreversible economic forces. I mean, it's like the physics of scale hitting at the exact same time as these fundamental and, frankly, negative regulatory shifts, like the FMMO amendments we saw back in June.
So consolidation used to be this long, slow economic pressure.
Right. But now the timeline is just rapidly accelerating because of these external forces hitting all at once.
And the stakes are just incredibly high. We've got the hard numbers here, and they are, frankly, pretty alarming. Rabobank, which is known for its really measured analysis.
Yeah, they're not exactly known for hype.
Not at all. They're projecting 7 to 9% annual farm exits through 2027.
Okay, wait. Let's translate that 7 to 9% into something tangible. On a base of what, roughly 39,000 U.S. dairy operations, 7 to 9%, that's approximately 2,800 dairy farms expected to close in 2025 alone.
2,800.
Just think about that. Think about your region, your local co-op, your neighbors. I mean, that is just a brutal reality.
And that number, 2,800 farms in a single year, it just demands urgency. The core message of our piece, and this is based on analyzing those exits, is that the difference between strategic planning and crisis management, it often amounts to several $100,000 in preserved equity.
That's it. That's the whole game right there.
If you wait until the bank forces your hand, you lose money. You can even lose your retirement.
Absolutely. The value difference between strategically selling a healthy, high-performing herd and, well-maintained, serviceable equipment today versus having those assets dumped in a forced liquidation auction 6 months from now when the banker's managing the process. It's massive.
It's the difference between walking away with resources to transition to something else.
Or walking away with nothing but debt.
And here's where it gets really interesting and little controversial. The core critique here is that the conversation happening in bank boardrooms, in co-op executive offices, it's fundamentally ahead of the producer's timeline.
Way ahead. Lenders see trouble 6 to 9 months before the average farmer does.
And that gap, that 6 to 9 month information delay, is the single greatest threat to equity preservation for the mid-sized dairy today.
We are going to explain exactly why this gap exists. We're going to look at the 4 key metrics the banks are watching that signal your risk level and why that window for strategic decisions, whether it's exit, pivot, scale, or partnership, is now only 12 to 18 months long.
The clock is absolutely ticking. What we're arguing is that the internal deadline for making a firm directional decision, not, the final step of selling, but the commitment to a path, is 60 days.
60 days. Once you feel that sustained margin pressure, you've got 2 months to decide how you're going to fight this structural headwind.
Or the choice will be made for you.
So let's jump into the core issue that creates all this pressure. The structural reality, check that. Well, that few people outside of academia really want to hear.
All right, let's start with the hard reality. Deep dive segment 1, the unsolvable cost gap and scale economics. This is probably the hardest reality check in the entire industry, and it comes straight from the highest quality USDA data available.
I'll admit, this is a gut punch for me to even talk about, because I know how prideful dairy farmers are. Every farmer believes, and they should, that if they just manage better, if they squeeze that extra pound of fat-corrected milk, if they get that forage program dialed in perfectly, they can beat the big guys.
And they can. They can absolutely be more efficient than a poorly run mega dairy. There's no question about that.
Right. But they cannot, under the current market conditions, beat the structural physics of scale economics. It's just a different game.
That's the painful reality. The USDA Economic Research Service data is incredibly clear on this point. And it's the data that processors and lenders are modeling their entire business against.
So what does it say?
It says operations with 2,500 plus cows produce milk at roughly $3 to $4 per hundredweight, less than 300 to 500 cow dairies.
$3 to $4. That's not a small number.
It's a massive, historical, proven structural gap. And, let's really emphasize that 21% figure that came out of the earlier ERS research.
Yeah, that report noted that 200 to 499 cow farms, their production costs were about 21% above the average costs of farms with 2,500 plus head.
21%. That is a staggering disadvantage.
When you're staring down a $3 or $4 difference in your cost of production, which is often, 15 to 20% of the final price, you just can't make that up by getting a better veterinarian or buying a slightly newer feed wagon.
No, it's a baked-in difference of scale. It translates directly to survival margins, even when markets are stable.
Let's get specific on the cost benchmarks, because this is what the banks use to model risk. The most efficient scaled operations, we're talking 2,500 plus cows, they're sitting at around, $7 to $8 per hundredweight production cost?
$7 to $8. So think about that. When milk is trading at $17, which is a fairly average price in recent history, they have a $9 to $10 profit margin.
$9 to $10 to pay down debt, reinvest, weather the next downturn. It's a massive safety buffer.
Now compare that to the average mid-size operation, that 300 to 500 cow segment. Even when they're really well managed, they're sitting around $10.50 to $11 per hundredweight production cost.
So that immediately shrinks their buffer to maybe $6 or $7 when prices are at $17. But that critical structural gap of $3 to $4 per hundredweight, it just remains there regardless of how hard they push their feed efficiency.
And that's the crux of the issue. The farmer who wakes up at 4 a.m., who prides themselves on running a tight ship, they can absolutely narrow the gap. Maybe they bring that $10.50 down to $9.50 through superior genetics and meticulous feed programs.
But they can't get to $7.50.
They cannot, through management alone, bring themselves down to $7.50. It's simply not possible given the fixed costs.
And that's the hard thing to admit. We have to look at why that structural gap exists, because it's not based on management quality. It's based on the leverage of capital and labor.
Right. Let's start with labor efficiency. That's often the biggest cost center, right outside of feed. If you're running a 300 cow dairy, you likely have the owner-operator who does the milking, the feeding, the breeding, the paperwork, the HR, the maintenance.
They're wearing 5 or 6 critical hats.
Exactly. And at 2,000 cows, you can specialize those roles.
Right. You hire a dedicated mechanic who keeps the downtime low, a dedicated HR manager who handles regulations and compliance, a dedicated nutritionist who buys feed forward. And that labor cost is spread across 5 or 6 times the volume.
So the cost per hundredweight for labor just drops dramatically.
A specialty labor role that costs, say, $75,000 a year. That might add $3.50 per hundredweight to the cost of a 300 cow farm. But it's only 50 cents per hundredweight on a 2,000 cow farm. I mean, that's just massive leverage.
And the same leverage applies to equipment costs. Think about a modern TMR mixer or a big manure handling system.
A huge capital expense.
Right. If you pay $250,000 for a crucial piece of equipment, The depreciation, the financing, the operating cost per hundredweight is dramatically lower if that equipment is servicing 2,000 cows running 18 hours a day.
Versus 300 cows running 6 hours a day. It's the whole concept of fully amortizing your fixed capital. A 300 cow farm might have their equipment costs spread too thin, running that equipment inefficiently just because they need it for a short window.
And the big farm is constantly using its capital, lowering the cost per unit of work done.
And we absolutely cannot ignore feed procurement. This is where volume discounts hit hard.
Every producer knows the benefit of buying in bulk.
Right, but the scaled operation is consistently buying truckloads, even train par loads of commodities like corn or soybean meal.
So even if you grow the absolute best corn silage, optimizing tonnage and digestibility on your own farm, the 5,000 cow dairy next door is still buying soybean meal for maybe $70 to $100 a ton less.
Just due to sheer volume and logistical efficiency, that is a pure unmanaged cost advantage. You can't outmanage that.
Which naturally leads to technology investment. Things that are currently borderline ridiculous for a 300 cow dairy.
Like advanced automated monitoring systems, robotic milkers.
Sophisticated wastewater treatment. They become obvious, easy choices at 2,000 cows because the investment is instantly justified by the increased yield, the reduced labor, or the compliance savings.
So if I'm a mid-sized operation, my management focus, it can make my cost of production $10.50 instead of $11.50. I can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely can.
But because I still have to pay full price for inputs and my fixed capital costs are spread across too few units, I simply cannot bring myself down to that $7.50 level.
And that is the mythbuster angle right there. We have to be honest. If you were strictly focused on commodity milk production at that 300 to 700 cow level, the physics of scale are against you. You are constantly fighting gravity.
Which means if you're a mid-sized operation planning for the next 5 years, you have to be doing something else. A premium market, organic transition, direct sales. Something that earns a premium higher than that $3 to $4 cost gap.
Or the structural math is going to catch you.
It's going to catch you when the next inevitable down cycle hits. And that down cycle is already here, fueled by these outside forces that are just cementing this structural shift.
So let's pivot. Let's look outside the farm gate. Deep dive segment 2. Follow the money, processor capital, and regulatory pain. We need to see who exactly is confirming and financing this consolidation.
If you really want to know the direction of the dairy industry, you just follow the capital investment. And the capital is screaming one thing at the top of its lungs right now.
Which is?
Get big or get out.
And the number is just staggering. The International Dairy Foods Association, IDFA, announced that processors have committed $11 billion in new and expanded manufacturing capacity.
11 billion with a B.
Across 19 states. We are talking over 50 individual massive projects scheduled to come online through early 2028.
Wait, $11 billion is. That's a truly staggering commitment. These are not small renovations. These are greenfield, world-scale facilities. And these plants don't get, conceptualized, permitted, and built overnight.
No, this is years in the making.
They are planned years in advance, which means this vision of consolidation has been locked in by the processors for years.
Exactly. And this is where the economist context is so crucial. The analysts we spoke with said these facilities are not designed for the farm structure we have today, where the median farm size is still relatively small.
They're built for the future.
They are built specifically for a future landscape where the median supplier is considerably larger, capable of delivering vast, consistent, high-quality milk volumes.
Let's talk about what they're building, because that tells the whole story. They're building massive, ultra-high-speed powder plants that require enormous throughput to be profitable.
Massive, automated cheese blocks facilities.
And these places are designed for continuous, high-volume operation, the kind of operation that only a handful of mega dairies in the region can reliably supply 24/7, 365.
So if you're a 400-cow operator in the Midwest, and your co-op or the plant you ship to is suddenly putting, say, $300 million into a new drying facility, you have to stop and ask a hard question.
Is that investment in me? Or are they investing in the infrastructure that favors the guys with 3,000 cows who can reliably fill that capacity and drive down the processor's cost per unit?
It's the ultimate external confirmation bias for consolidation. The The processors aren't just hoping farms get bigger.
They are building for farms to get bigger. They have placed an $11 billion bet on the continued disappearance of the mid-sized producer because the economics of their new, massive, hyper-efficient plants, they just don't pencil out if their supply chain is fragmented.
And the timing of this massive capital commitment lines up perfectly with regulatory changes that specifically attack the mid-sized producer's cash flow.
The June 2025 FMMO amendments.
This isn't just bad luck. It's two giant headwinds hitting simultaneously.
We should probably define FMMO quickly for any newer listeners. It stands for Federal Milk Marketing Orders. These are the regional regulations that govern how your milk is pooled and priced.
They fundamentally impact the dollars you see in your mailbox. They're complicated, but the bottom line is the June 2025 amendments delivered a swift and painful shock to the system.
Let's be really clear about that FMMO impact. The American Farm Bureau analysis, just looking at the initial 3 months of data under the new rules, it showed a combined pool value reduction of $337 million.
Nationwide.
$337 million just vanished out of the system in 3 months. And specifically, the class price reductions from the changes to the make allowance. They range from 85 to 93 cents per hundredweight.
Almost a full dollar per hundredweight taken right off the top of your check.
And that's because they shifted the financial burden of processing costs. By changing the make allowance, which is the assumed cost processors have to make cheese or powder, they effectively just lowered the baseline price paid to the producer.
And that hits your cash flow planning immediately, especially for farms that are already operating on really thin margins.
Let's make this real. A 300-cow operation shipping roughly 680,000 pounds a month, which is pretty standard performance.
Yep.
They're seeing a reduced revenue of roughly $5,800 to $6,300 per month, just from these FMMO changes alone.
$6,000 a month. That's a huge chunk of your monthly debt service. That could be a hired milker's entire paycheck. Or that's your yearly property tax payment suddenly becoming unaffordable.
That money just vanished because of regulatory change, and it's compounding the pressure caused by that $3 to $4 structural cost gap we just talked about.
So you're getting squeezed on one end by the scale advantage. That's a $3 to $4 loss. And then the regulatory changes squeeze the middle. That's another 90-cent loss. You've lost a substantial cushion before you even factor in volatile feed costs or interest rates.
And this is why producers are feeling the pinch on equipment decisions and breeding decisions right now. The capital just isn't there to absorb these hits.
And that feeling of tightness, that's exactly what your lender is tracking. If you're feeling this pressure, they already saw it coming 6 to 9 months ago.
Which brings us to our next segment, Deep Dive Segment 3, 4 metrics worth watching. This is the heart of why the timing challenge is so severe. We need to look at the metrics that define your runway and see them through the lender's eyes.
Right. They recognize deteriorating conditions 6 to 9 months before producers realize the crisis is terminal.
We tend to focus on things we can control immediately, right? Somatic cell count, feed efficiency, daily milk weights.
All important things.
Very important. But the lender is looking at trajectory, trend lines, and portfolio risk. They have the aggregated data from every single farm they finance in the region, which gives them a huge predictive advantage.
Let's start with metric number 1. Margin over feed cost, or MOC. This is familiar because of the Dairy Margin Coverage Program, the DMC. We all watch it, but the lender tracks your personal MOC.
And we saw margins peak at a really healthy $15.57 per hundredweight back in September 2024. That felt safe.
It did. But in many regions, that number has compressed significantly, moving quickly into the danger zone.
The benchmarks here are key. Extension economists are clear. Equity building slows way down below $12 per hundredweight.
Below 12, you're usually just sustaining debt and maintenance.
And if you drop below $8.50 per hundredweight consistently for more than 2 quarters, that's the territory where most operations start actively drawing down cash reserves or relying on rolling over operating loans.
But we have to add the nuance here. Land ownership fundamentally changes that baseline.
Oh, absolutely.
If you own your land outright and have minimal real estate debt, your cost structure is totally different. Maybe you can weather $8.50 for longer because your total cost of production is lower, but for highly leveraged operations or those renting significant acreage,
$8.50 isn't just bleeding capital, you're eating into your collateral.
and that's the question the bank is asking. How long can you sustain $8.50? They are modeling out the answer for you, even if you're not modeling it for yourself.
Okay, metric 2, replacement rate. This is a subtle but incredibly powerful indicator of financial stress. It deserves way more attention in annual financial discussions.
So why does a high replacement rate signal long-term distress to a lender?
Because it signals underlying systemic problems in the herd that are directly impacting profitability and future capacity. Healthy rates are what? 30 to 35%?
Right around there.
When you start pushing above 35 to 38%, that signals real trouble. It means you're losing too many cows too early in their productive life, often due to chronic fresh cow management issues, transition period failure, or just poor breeding decisions.
And the trap is that the financial stress itself often causes the high replacement rate. We have that great quote in the source material from the Michigan producer.
Oh yeah, trying to save money in ways that actually cost money.
Exactly. It's a cascade effect.
It is. You try to save money by cutting corners on feed quality for far-off dry cows or by keeping marginal cows longer because you don't want to buy replacements. But those marginal high-risk cows increase your vet costs, they impact your component test, which reduces your premium, and they bring down the overall health of the herd.
So the lender sees that replacement rate just ticking up month over month and knows exactly what's happening. They see the poor protocols and the poor cash flow decisions being made. It's a key indicator of internal operational collapse.
Okay, metric 3, component position. This matters more now than ever before thanks to those FMMO changes.
Right. The new regulatory environment explicitly stresses and rewards high component values, specifically high butterfat and protein.
You just can't afford to ship average milk anymore. You have to be hitting those premium thresholds. The source we looked at said farms below regional component averages are leaving a tangible 15 to 25 cents per hundredweight on the table.
Over millions of pounds of milk, that adds up fast. And 15 to 25 cents is exactly the kind of margin you need to capture to offset some of that FMO pain we talked about.
This is a critical area where excellent management can still move the needle. You can claw back some revenue here, but it takes precise nutritional planning and attention to detail.
And the bank looks at this because a farm that is consistently hitting high components is demonstrating two things: superior herd health and superior management attention. It just reduces their perceived risk dramatically.
Which brings us to the big one, metric 4, debt-to-equity ratio. This is the ultimate lender flexibility indicator. It's what they use to judge your capacity for future borrowing or your vulnerability to forced asset sales.
Lender comfort zones are absolute when it comes to DE. They start monitoring very closely when that ratio increases above 65%.
And that 65% line isn't just a number. That's the moment the banker stops talking about future expansion and starts talking about collateral security. You can literally feel the difference in those meetings.
And you are on the very edge of their comfort zone where they lose all flexibility when you hit 75 to 80%. If you're there, the bank is going to start requiring more collateral, insisting on faster repayment schedules.
And maybe suggesting you proactively diversify or sell assets before they start dictating it.
And here's the crucial insight. This gets right back to that 6 to 9 month information gap. The lender sees trends in this ratio across their entire portfolio of dairy farms before you even notice it hitting your individual farm.
So if they see 10 other operations that look just like yours, with similar MOC and replacement rates, they know your ratio is likely to follow the rest. They are reacting to an industry-wide trend before you, the producer, feel that individual crunch.
If you wait until you hit 80%, you're in crisis management mode.
But if you talk to them when you're trending towards 65%, you still have options. Your equity is preserved and you have negotiating power. That 6 to 9 month gap is everything.
Okay, so let's look at how this plays out. Deep dive segment 4, how exits unfold and lessons from abroad. When the pressure becomes too great, how does this process typically unfold?
Well, we tend to focus on the most dramatic outcome, which is bankruptcy. U.S. courts data shows 361 Chapter 12 bankruptcy cases filed in just the first half of 2025.
And that's a shocking number. It's a 55% increase year over year.
55%. That tells you just how quickly leverage is tightening and margins are disappearing. Chapter 12 is for family farmers. It's designed to help them reorganize. But the sheer volume shows how systemic this financial distress is.
But here's the crucial context from our research. Bankruptcies only represent 12 to 13% of total farm exits.
Right. The other 87 to 88% follow different, often less traumatic paths, but only if they choose that path proactively.
So we really need to contrast forced liquidations with strategic exits. Forced liquidation is that crisis scenario we've been talking about, where value erosion is just substantial.
Equipment sold under time pressure brings fire sale prices. Herds are moved when buyers know the seller is desperate. That's when the DE ratio hits 80% and the bank forces the action.
And the strategic exit.
That's selling while the herd is healthy, components are high, equipment is maintained, and there is time to properly market the assets. Farm transition specialists consistently say these families preserve considerably more equity.
And that difference often amounts to those several $100,000 that can save their retirement.
For those who decide to stay, the necessary path is often an operational pivot. But that takes capital investment right when cash is tightest, and it takes time, 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer, to stabilize the new business model.
We're seeing a huge trend in beef on dairy programs, especially across the Midwest and the Plains.
Yeah, operations are reducing their milking herds, often keeping only the highest genetic females and breeding the rest to premium beef sires. The 350 cow producer in Iowa we looked at, who made this transition, he noted the learning curve was incredibly steep.
You can't just flip a switch.
No. You need to understand carcass grading, forward contracting in the beef market, different feed conversions. It's a whole new business.
Or you have the shift to organic certification. Huge potential revenue boost, but it comes with a major multi-year cash flow challenge. That 18 to 36-month transition period where you have organic costs without organic prices.
That can break an operation if they don't have massive reserves or secured credit to get through it.
And then you have the regional pivots, Northeast operations using their proximity to big cities for direct sales.
California dairies doing specialty cheese partnerships or vertical integration.
Or Western grazing operations focusing on niche grass-fed markets. All of these are viable, but they require a fundamentally different business model than pure commodity production.
And crucially, the capital you need to make those pivots happen, the specialized equipment, the marketing staff, the feed changes, it has to be secured while the operation still has high equity and credit available.
If you wait until your DE ratio is at 80%, those options are off the table. The bank won't lend to a distressed asset.
It all comes down to proactive choice versus reactive disaster. But let's zoom out and look at the contrarian take from Canada. This gives some deep insight into structural pressure, even when you take price risk off the table.
The Canadian lesson, yes. Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, he's a leading food policy researcher. He projected that Canada could lose nearly half of its remaining dairy farms by 2030.
And that's the real shocker for listeners, because this is despite operating under a government-mandated supply management system.
The very system designed to guarantee price stability and prevent the kind of consolidation we're seeing here.
If they are facing mass attrition, it proves that the structural forces of scale are almost unstoppable, regardless of the market price.
It changes the mechanism of consolidation, but not the outcome.
Exactly. In Canada, the underlying economics still favor scale, but the pressure point is the staggering cost of quota. We're talking Alberta quota ranging from $52,000 to $58,000 per kilogram on the open exchange.
Just think about that number for a second. If you were a 100-cow operation, your quota value alone, just the right to milk those cows, can easily top $20 million.
That's the cost of entry for the next generation. It makes succession almost impossible. How does a young farmer buy into that? They face these quota obligations that completely dwarf the productive capacity of the operation they're trying to acquire.
So even though Canadian milk prices are roughly double what they are in the U.S., the math often still doesn't work for a generational transition because the debt load is just too immense.
So in Canada, the structural advantage of scale isn't the lower cost of production like it is here. The advantage of scale is having enough collateralized quota to absorb the debt and make a transition feasible for a large existing operator, or just selling that quota for retirement.
The high price protects the farmer until retirement, but the massive capital cost of the quota prevents the next generation from taking over.
So the insight for U.S. producers is absolutely clear. Price protection alone, whether it's a temporary high cycle here or a regulated system like in Canada, it does not prevent consolidation. It just changes the pressure point.
The underlying physics of capital leverage and cost efficiency still favor scale.
Which means hoping for sustained $25 milk is not a business plan. You have to actively attack the cost gap or find a premium market.
Okay, let's move to the final segment here, Deep Dive Segment 5, the decision window and the 60-day deadline. We've established the structural reality, the external forces, the metrics. Now we need to define the urgency for the producer.
We keep hitting this timeline because it is the most actionable piece of information we have. The window for strategic decisions runs only 12 to 18 months from the initial sustained margin compression.
Why is that 12 to 18-month window so critical? What happens after that?
After that, your equity erodes to the point where securing new capital for a pivot or getting a fair valuation for a strategic exit becomes basically impossible. Once your equipment starts needing major repairs you can't afford, or your herd health and replacement rate slides, the value of your assets just drops off a cliff.
You move from having preserved equity to just being a distressed asset.
And we have to acknowledge the human element in this. European research suggests only 5 to 8% of at-risk farmers make proactive decisions. The vast majority wait.
And I get why. It's emotional. The farm is their life, their identity, multi-generational history. It's incredibly difficult to make that rational financial decision when your heart is telling you to just wait for next year's corn crop or the next cycle peak.
But waiting is the most expensive mistake you can make right now. We need to clearly state the 4 directional choices a farmer must commit to within 60 days of recognizing that sustained margin pressure. A firm commitment to one of these paths needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast.
Okay, what's path number 1?
The first, and often the most financially sound if the numbers are bad, is strategic exit. That's about preserving equity. Sell while the herd is healthy, while the assets hold value, and move forward with dignity and capital.
Second, operational pivot. This is your beef on dairy, your organics, direct sales. But this requires a structured, costed plan and an immediate capital commitment to have any chance of succeeding.
Third is scaling. If your region and finances support it, scale rapidly and aggressively to 1,200 plus cows to get access to that $3 to $4 cost advantage. This requires massive capital, aggressive debt, and major risk, but it is a valid path if the resources are there.
And fourth,
Partnership. This means trading some independence for stability and scale advantages. It could be contracting your milk supply long-term, integrating with a larger neighboring farm, or securing guaranteed inputs through a highly structured agreement.
and we have to talk about what not to do, because this is what 87% of exiting farmers do.
Do not continue pure commodity production at 300 to 700 cows, passively waiting for higher prices to overcome the structural cost gap and the FMMO pain. That math, as we've proven, rarely resolves through price alone. You will run out of time and equity.
All right, let's bring this home. Actionable insights. You just finished milking, you're sitting in the cab of your pickup, driving to the feed store, and you have this deep dive playing. What are the 3 things they need to remember from today, and what should they do about it starting this week?
Okay, 3 crucial takeaways, all focused on getting ahead of the curve. The first one is about that information asymmetry.
Takeaway number 1. The lender knows your runway. That 6 to 9 month information gap is real, and it's costing you money every single month you delay. So what's the immediate action this week?
Immediate action this week. Calculate your actual MOC. Pull your recent milk statements, pull your feed invoices, including purchased forages and supplements, and establish your absolute baseline. You have to know. Are you operating at $11, $9, or less? You need a number you can trust before you do anything else.
And then medium term, say the next 3 to 6 months.
Talk to your lender directly and proactively. Ask the hard, necessary question. Based on my numbers and your portfolio trends in this region, what is my realistic runway? What options do you see for operations like mine that are feeling this compression? Get ahead of their concern.
And the long-term positioning, 1 to 2 years out.
Make a directional decision. Don't just passively wait. You have to choose one of those 4 paths: strategic exit, operational pivot, aggressive scale, or a structured partnership, and develop a structured, costed plan around that chosen path.
Okay, takeaway number 2. This focuses on that internal structural reality we talked about.
Takeaway 2, the cost gap is structural. That $3 to $4 per hundredweight differential will not disappear through management alone. It's physics. So what do you do this week to fight physics?
Immediate action this week. Review your replacement rate. Are you consistently above 35%? Identify the transition cow protocols or the breeding decisions that are causing that increase. Stop trying to save money by keeping marginal cows. It is costing you more in vet bills and component reduction. Look at your culls.
And for the 3 to 6 month strategy, you've got to focus on revenue optimization where management still makes a huge difference.
Maximize your component position. Get with your nutritionist immediately. Make sure your butterfat and protein are hitting or exceeding those regional premium thresholds. That 15 to 25 cents per hundredweight opportunity is a direct internal offset to the FMMO and structural pressure. Don't leave easy money on the table.
And the long-term positioning here requires a really clear vision.
Define your niche or your scale goal. If you commit to staying in commodity milk, you must commit to scaling to 1,200 plus cows to access those lower operational costs, period. If scaling isn't feasible, you have to commit fully and financially to a diversified market, beef on dairy, organic, direct sales. There's no productive middle ground anymore.
Okay, final takeaway, number 3. This addresses the external forces and the capital constraints.
Takeaway 3. The $11 billion speaks volumes. Processor investment favors scale, and you must plan around that fact. What's the immediate action this week?
Review your debt-to-equity ratio. Know exactly where you sit. Are you approaching 65% or are you getting close to 75%? This is the metric that determines your lender's flexibility. You need to know your limit before they tell you.
Medium-term strategy, 3 to 6 months out.
Secure capital or credit now, if you need it. If you are pursuing a pivot or a scale-up, both of which require significant investment, secure the necessary financing while your equity is still preserved and credit is still available. Do not wait until your MOC is tanking and your DE ratio hits 80%.
And the long-term positioning to really survive this structural shift.
Commit to proactive timing. You have to position yourself in that critical 5 to 8% of producers who make proactive, strategic decisions. Ensure equity preservation rather than being forced into a crisis liquidation. The math doesn't care about your farm's history, but you do. Take action now while you still control the timeline.
That leaves producers with a very clear, if very difficult, set of priorities. This is necessary data for every single producer listening.
This has been the Deep Dive from the Bullvine podcast. For more straight-talking industry analysis, including the detailed ERS data and Cornell Pro Dairy benchmarks we mentioned today, head to www.thebullvine.com.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're out with new deep dives every day, and upcoming topics will focus on the economic future of forage commodities in a dry climate and the impact of new regional labor regulations hitting the dairy sector hard. We'll see you next time.